Okay, so we're going to have a look at the principles of hypertrophy or muscle growth. So if we zoom in a little bit here, looking at two physiological principles of hypertrophy or muscle growth. So what's actually happening in the muscle? So they both grow the muscle diameter, so the actual circumference, of the muscle, but it's happening in two very different ways. So on the left-hand side, we have what's called sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. And on the right-hand side, we have what's called myofibrillar hypertrophy. So on the left-hand side, when we look at the sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, what you'll notice is on the left diagram, which is trying to replicate a muscle fiber, which is made up of a whole bunch of thousands and thousands of little string-like myofibrils, and that's what's represented in those little dots. So as the muscle has grown in this example, what you can see is, I haven't gone and counted all the dots, but it's about similar, is the dots haven't really changed in the amount or the size, but the actual circumference of the muscle has changed. So it is wider. How has that happened? Well, it's happened by increasing the amount of fluid, and when I say fluid, not water per se, but blood and plasma. So all of the things that are involved in that, blood is not just pure red liquid, it has other key components in it, and they are called metabolic products or properties, and it could be things like proteins and calcium molecules or ions, etc. So what has changed? In this example, we have increased the amount of fluid, the plasma, the blood, and its properties in this area. So think about when you are actually doing a set of exercises and you get what's known as a pump, in inverted commas. This is what is the example of what is actually happening at the muscle when you get a pump. So you are stressing the muscle and increasing the amount of blood flow to that area and getting a pump. So your muscles feel bigger, and over time they will become bigger. But what hasn't happened is a change in the size of the muscle fibers and the amount of the fibers. So there is no change in the myofibrillar hypertrophy. As we come across into the other example here, into myofibrillar hypertrophy, what we will see is, from the example on the left-hand side, we have the original size of the myofibrils, the actual finite string-like components that make up the entire muscle fiber. And to give you an understanding it's like bundles of bundles of bundles of bundles. So one myofibril, is made up of thousands of little subcomponents, and then that same analogy keeps working forward. So it is bundles of bundles of bundles. As we see that the change in the muscle is now actually coming from, so the circumference is roughly about the same as the example we used on the left-hand side for sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. But what is happening here is we're not changing the amount of fluid or the plasma that is around the muscle fibers or the myofibrils. It is actually the myofibrils themselves that is increasing in size and amount. This is actually going to increase the ability to produce force, which means that you can lift heavier. Whereas on the left-hand side, the muscles might appear to be bigger, and they are, but it's not because the myofibrils have increased or increased in size. It's just the sheer nature of the type of training that you're doing, which we'll explain in a second or in the next video. So the muscle circumference, the overall measurement, if you were to measure, let's say, the biceps, the muscle fibers in sarcoplasmic have not changed size, but the muscle is actually bigger. Okay, so as we zoom out a little bit, we have those two physiological adaptations, let's call it. You see on the left-hand side there is no change in muscle fiber size, so therefore there's not necessarily going to be an increasing strength or your ability to produce force or run faster. Whereas on the right-hand side, all of the development and the overall thickness of the muscle is coming from the increase in the amount and the size of the actual muscle fibers that are doing the work. Now let me just close this little video by saying that You can train in certain ways to have more hypertrophy in one of these two components, but you'll never be exclusively just one way. So if you do a lot of training that you're focusing on the sarcoplasmic increase, then you'll also get a little bit of strength gain in the myofibril and vice versa.